So today I'd like to talk to you about a project that I've been very involved with, which is our Outbreak Investigations Program and the PRRS cases we've investigated through it. So PRRS research, when you come to control and prevention of PRRS, basically falls into two questions. The first research question is, how do we return to baseline production faster after an outbreak? And the second is, how do we keep PRRS out? As an industry, we are very good at number one and at making strides at it. Dr. Hollis told us about some intervention strategies he used in one of his farms yesterday. And the second is, how do we keep PRRS out? And unfortunately, as an industry, we are not doing very good at keeping PRRS out of our farms. Approximately 20 to 40% of our breeding herds break with PRRS every. So the million-dollar question right now is, how do we keep PRRS out of our farms? In order to do that, we need to figure out how PRRS is getting into our farms. Is there a specific risk factor, carrying agent, risk event that PRRS likes to come in with most often? Are there biosecurity gaps that are common between these farms that are breaking with PRRS every year, once or twice a year? And so that is where the Outbreak Investigation Program comes in. We developed this program in 2013 with funding from the Iowa Pork Producers Association, and we currently work with 3 regional control projects in Iowa and have 29 breeding herds enrolled in the project. Our objectives are to enhance the knowledge of PRRS spread and prevention by investigating outbreaks in a timely, efficient, and uniform manner. And by doing this, we hope that we can determine the most common gaps of biosecurity that may be leading to PRRS introduction on breeding herds. To achieve these objectives and to make sure that all of our investigations are done in a uniform manner, we've developed a standard outbreak investigation form that we use for every outbreak investigation. This form collects basic information about the herd, the premises, and the surrounding area, in addition to information on the current outbreak. And after that, we have a set of standard questions about risk events that happen on swine farms and the carrying agents associated with them. The risk events that we look at are listed here on this slide. They fall into 7 categories, which is swine movements, vehicles and deliveries, people movement, pork and food product entry, manure removal, other animals, and air and water. So we basically look at any pig, person, vehicle, or even other animal that enters or exits the swine farm during our investigation period. And after our investigations take about 2 to 3 hours, consist of a meeting with at least 2 veterinary outbreak facilitators from our team, the herd veterinarian, and some on-farm personnel. And during this investigation, we use the form I previously described to facilitate an open-ended discussion about the outbreak and the events that happened in the 4 weeks preceding the suspected onset of PRRS. And then after our investigations are done, we compile a written report for the herd veterinarian. This report summarizes our findings and identifies the likelihood that each risk event was responsible for PRRS introduction as low, medium, or high. And we also, if we rate anything as medium or high, provide biosecurity improvement recommendations for the producer to lessen their risk in the future. So to understand how we assign low, medium, or high risk ratings, we first need to understand that every risk event has multiple carrying agents associated with it. For example, we'll take the event of semen entry. When we look at this event, we look at the semen itself, the packaging it comes in, the person that delivers it, and the vehicle that delivers it. And after we get through our questions on that, we qualitatively assign a level of risk based on how frequently that event happened, the likelihood that one of those carrying agents had infectious PRRS when it entered the farm. So that looks at kind of the surrounding area characteristics. And finally, the likelihood that infectious PRRS from that carrying agent would get to a pig in the farm. So that looks at the farm level biosecurity. So now that we've kind of gone over the background, I'll briefly touch on some of our results from the investigations. In the past year, we investigated 8 PRRS cases on small to medium-sized independent producers. Herd size ranged from 550 sows to 1,200 sows. We investigated 3 PRRS isolates, which were a 126-2, a 174, and a 144. All of the farms were in a swine-dense area and had a previous history of PRRS outbreaks. Now, the first question we always ask is, how often did this event happen during our investigations? And through this, we found that people movement was the most common event on all farms. It happened about 90 times on a farm this size, which encompassed 50% of the total risk events during the investigation period, which on the farms we investigated was 181 times. And if we compare this to larger farms, as I know some of you work on those, this is data from another study we've done. The risk events, as you increase the number of sows, greatly increases. It's almost 700 on a farm with about 4,500 sows, but the general trend remains the same. People movement was still the most frequent event on farm. Now this graph shows the events that were rated medium or high risk for PRRS introduction across the 8 cases we investigated. So the x-axis shows the individual risk event, and the y-axis shows the number of cases it was rated as high risk, which is indicated by the red bar, or medium risk, which is indicated by the yellow bar. And as you can see here, all of the events within the swine movement category, so your cull sow removal, replacement gilt entry, semen entry, and wean pig removal, and all of the events within the people movement category appear on this list. So in the cases we investigated, swine movement and people movement held the greatest risk. But for the remainder of the time today, I'm going to focus on the 3 events that held the most risk most often and kind of give you a little bit of a justification on why we rated these as high risk, which would be on-farm employees, cull sow removal, and feed delivery. On-farm employee entry was the most frequent event on every farm we investigated, which makes sense. You have to have people come in to take care of your pigs. But because this happens so often, the probability that PRRS could come in with an employee is higher because with more events, you're going to have more opportunities for PRRS to occur, and we know that compliance is never 100% when it comes to people. Many of the farms we investigated did not require their employees to practice downtime. In one case, an employee worked at 2 finishers outside of the production system every morning, got in his truck, drove 20 minutes to the sow farm, and entered the sow farm and did his chores there for the day. In another case, the sow farm was sharing employees between a lot of different areas of production. So they had one employee that worked at their feed mill. He delivered feed to their finishers and one of their PRRS positive swine farms, and he also hauled all of their fats to market, in addition to choring on this farm. So there was lots of opportunities for that employee to come in contact with PRRS in his day-to-day operations. And the final commonality between that is that sanitation procedures for employees that needed to exit the barn during the day to either take deads to a compost pile or bang on feed bins were not always the same. Some farms would allow them to just directly walk outside and walk back in without changing boots or clothing or showering. So there was no barrier preventing them from tracking infectious PRRS from the outside into their farms. Cull sow movement was rated as high or medium risk in 6 out of the 8 cases. And this is typically because cull sow removal was contracted non-exclusively to a third party. The trailers that came could haul multiple types of swine, and the producers either didn't know the sanitation procedures or there were none. The trailer showed up dirty. In general, in the cases we found that biosecurity related to cull sow movement was just kind of forgotten about because the culls were leaving the farm and they didn't perceive a level of risk. And once we delved into these issues a little bit more in the investigations, we found that a lot of employees were not following strict lines of separation during transport. So when the dirty trailer showed up and then the employee went on to load the cull, then went back to get another cull sow, that was an area we identified as high risk for PRRS introduction. Feed mill biosecurity and feed delivery was rated as high to medium risk in 5 out of the 8 cases. And I want to stress that this was not feed from your commercial feed mills or a large cooperative. This was feed that was sourced from either a farm-owned or sow cooperative-owned feed mill that had virtually no biosecurity practices and was located on another swine farm. In a few cases, they were located on PRRS-positive swine farms. In one case, they actually used the same equipment within their feed mill as they did at their compost pile, and indicated to us that they had seen debris from a compost pile enter their rations, and that may have been an area where PRRS snuck into that farm. And then finally today, as I mentioned earlier, we work with area regional control projects, and that allows us to see the different PRRS isolates in the area and when individuals broke with PRRS. And we were able to actually draw some connections between a few farms using this. So I'll share a short story with that about you now. So Farm A broke with PRRS, and they were having some repair work done at that time. Eventually, those repairmen and their equipment went to PRRS negative Farm B. The repairmen had a couple nights down, but the equipment was not sanitized when it left Farm A, and it was not sanitized, disinfected, or quarantined before it entered Farm B. Shortly after that, Farm B became PRRS positive. And then during this time, on-farm employees and production personnel went back and forth between the PRRS positive Farm B and PRRS negative Farm C, with oftentimes within the same day with maybe 15 to 20 minutes of downtime as they drove from one farm to the other. So not surprisingly, Farm C became PRRS positive. And as we looked at the dendrograms and homology tables provided by the Regional Control Project, we saw that all of these isolates were greater than 98% homologous to each other, which led us to believe that the movement of repair personnel, equipment, or production personnel may have led to the spread of this isolate through the Regional Control Project. So in conclusion, the outbreak investigations provide timely identifications of gaps in biosecurity by giving producers and veterinarians immediate feedback after their outbreaks. And the true value of them to the veterinarian and the producer is that they identify specific areas on their farm where they have the highest level of risk, and they can focus all of their time and energy on finding biosecurity improvements for those areas and finding ways to lessen their risk. This program is also applicable to other endemic and emerging diseases. We've used it for PED and are currently using it to investigate Seneca virus A outbreaks in breeding herds in the Midwest. And if you don't take anything else from my presentation today, please take note that in the 8 cases we investigated, people were the highest risk. And through these investigations, it's led us to believe that we need to improve our communication with the personnel from these farms to educate them more on how PRRS can be transmitted and the importance of biosecurity and having these protocols. And oftentimes we found ourselves recommending them adding just a few simple extra layers of biosecurity to their employee entry. We often recommended that they add a simple bench, which used to be referred to as the Danish entry system, to their on-farm employee entry protocols, just to help them lessen that risk a little bit.